Up next, we have Allison Wood. She is a member of the Rand New England volunteer team. She is also a member of the Organic Acidemia Association and a task force member for Baby's First Test. Allison and her family have been touched by a rare disease, and she is here today to share her story. I would also like to mention that Allison has been helping me with this whole event over the past few months, and we are extremely appreciative for all the work and attention and organization that she's done to help this happen.
All right, can you guys hear me with this? Okay, cool. All right, so as Julie said, my name is Allison Wood. I am a dairy consultant. So similar to humans, we can take a sample from a calf at 24 hours old and kind of know with a 70% reliability what they're going to do with their life. So similar to genetic testing in humans, we do the same thing with cows. So I love conferences like this because it's so interesting to hear how it works in humans. It only costs $40 for a cow, just saying. So my husband, Mike, and I live in Fairhaven. That's kind of near Rutland. We have two kids, Marianne and Isaac. And one of our kids is just a little bit different. One of our kids has a special formula that they drink every day. When they were little, they had to have it every 2 hours when they were 2 months old, and then every 3 hours when they were 3 months old, and so forth and so forth. And they will be on that special formula for the rest of their life. One of my kids has a special diet. Everything that they eat is weighed and calculated for the day. They have a protein goal that they must meet. And I can tell you pretty much exactly what they've eaten every day for their entire life. And they'll be on that special diet for their whole life. One of my kids gets blood work done every month, every other month, depending, to check on their lysine levels, their arginine levels, and their carnitine levels. When they were little, they had blood work done every week, and then slowly it's gotten more measured out. For the first 2 years of one of my kids' life, we stayed completely away from most people, places, everything, to protect them from getting any illnesses. No Thanksgiving with families, no Christmas with families, any place where there were a lot of people we stayed away from. One of my kids has been hospitalized 6 times in their life. They've been poked and prodded more times than I could count ever. Anytime that they get sick, things change very, very quickly. They go on a even more specialized diet than their special diet, and usually get hospitalized to get special IV fluids and extra glucose to keep them from going into a catabolic state. So this is Isaac. You've probably seen my 2 little ones running around today. They're pretty cute, in my opinion. So Isaac has Glutaric Acidemia type 1. Glutaric Acidemia type 1 is a metabolic disorder where your body can't break down proteins properly. Specifically lysine and tryptophan they can't break down, and the buildups of these proteins within their body can cause brain damage. GA1 is a really, really tricky disease to explain. There's a lot of components to it, so instead of going into all the little details of GA1, I'll just tell you what would have happened 20 years ago if Isaac had been born. If he had been born 20 years ago, things would have been very, very different. He would have been perfectly healthy at birth. His head maybe would have been just a little bit bigger than the average baby's head, but other than that, just healthy as could be. When he was 6 to 9 months old, he would have gotten some sort of illness, like a stomach bug or a severe cold where he couldn't eat very well. And we would have put him to bed. But the next morning when we went to wake him up, we wouldn't be able to rouse him. So we'd call an ambulance. The ambulance would take him to the hospital where they would found that he had suffered from brain damage. On top of that, the brain damage might have looked very, very similar to shaken baby syndrome. So on top of seeing our baby in pain, we might have been accused of hurting our child. For the next week or so, we wouldn't have answers, and then finally the test would come back and show that he had GA1. But at that point, the damage would have already been done. And for the rest of his life, he would have suffered from a very painful movement disorder called dystonia. 90 to 95% of patients with GA1, if they're not treated from birth, will suffer from this metabolic stroke, if they're not treated. But that's not what happened with Isaac. This is Isaac, well, you can't really see in that picture, I guess. But this is Isaac the day he was born. And this is Isaac when he was 5 days old. When he was 5 days old, we got a call from a nurse at the pediatrician's office saying that his newborn screening had come back with an out-of-range result. I had heard about newborn screening, but I never really understood what it really meant or how important it is to saving so many babies' lives. I can tell you really every single detail from that conversation. I remember where I was standing when I picked up the phone. I remember writing out Glutaric Acidemia type 1 as the nurse spelled it out for me. She had to spell it out twice because my hands were shaking so bad the first time when she spelled it out. I think that anyone that has had an out-of-range newborn screening result can tell you all the details from that conversation because it's the moment that your life changes. Everything changes. After the call, I ran outside and Mike was out playing with Marianne, and he saw the look on my face and knew right away that something was wrong. So we rushed him back to the doctors that day to have the repeat screening done. And then 2 days later, it was confirmed that he had GA1 and we started treatment. So this is what a typical day looked like when Isaac was about a month old. I could still breastfeed, but he had to have his special formula. Everything was weighed down to the gram with the formula. Everything that he ate was kept track of. Anything that came out was kept track of. We had to weigh him all the time. Just everything was kept track of to make sure that he never went into a catabolic state. The goal would be to keep him from breaking down his own muscles because your muscles are so full of protein and you don't want all of that protein going to his brain. There were so many changes in that first 2 months of life. It didn't really make sense for him to go to daycare, obviously, because he would be around a lot of other kids. So my husband and I had to have a very long conversation about which one of us it would make sense for to quit their jobs. My husband has a business, I have a career that I really enjoy, and thankfully, my amazing mother over there retired early from her job so that she could stay home with Isaac and my other daughter to keep them away from germs as much as possible. I had never been sick really in my life. My husband had never been sick. Our daughter was generally pretty healthy. I'd never had to deal with insurance before. And I was thrown into this crazy world that I didn't realize that insurance, at least my insurance company, denied basically everything at first. And I didn't know. Thankfully, I was put in touch with Betty. And she helped me figure things out that insurance companies typically will deny things. So we went through all of those issues. Very similar to what she said earlier. We had his formula covered, but medical foods, because my company is based out of Wisconsin, all of that was denied. It was a big, big fight. I wrote a letter to my company, and the first year they were like, "Oh, that's great, Allison. We'll cover it." And then the next year they were like, "Well, we were nice for 1 year, so no, we're not going to cover it anymore." But luckily, we did get Isaac covered under the Katie Beckett program, but that too was a bit of a fight because Isaac, if you look at him, he's not the definition of disabled, but really, we could not take him out. We had to protect him. So that was another, just a lot of fights. And really, we just felt really alone in the beginning. Isaac was the first baby in Vermont to test positive for Glutaric Acidemia type 1, and we had no idea what we were doing. So the doctors were great, and we felt like his medical stuff was good, but in terms of like the support for the non-medical stuff, we just felt really alone. Obviously, we could not get daycare covered, so we have to pay my mom out of pocket, but we were also told that he needed to stay home. So there's just a lot of issues to work out. So we made it through 9 months without Isaac getting sick, and then he had his first hospitalization. And I would say that that first year of his life was the hardest one of mine. I wish I could put into words the fear that you feel knowing that if you make a mistake, it's going to change your child's life forever. If we missed one little illness, it could be devastating for him. It's a lot of pressure to put on a parent that's already caring for a newborn, which is a lot of pressure in itself. And on top of that, a certain percentage of children with GA1 will suffer from brain damage, really no matter what. And it can happen either in utero or during the birthing process, but getting an MRI is risky for children with GA1, so you just have to sit and wait and see if your child will be able to walk and if your child will be able to talk. And it's just really, really, really scary. But as Isaac's gotten older, things have gotten a lot easier. We're so thankful for the parents and doctors that came before us that fought to get Glutaric Acidemia type 1 added to the newborn screening panel. It's an incredibly rare disease, and without them fighting for it, our lives would be very, very different. But not just that, we're thankful for all of the medical community that has to do everything right to make sure that newborn screening works the way it's supposed to work. The nurse has to get the blood spot done correctly, and then that has to get to the courier. The courier has to get it to the lab in a timely manner. The lab has to do the test correctly. That has to get back to the newborn screening department. The newborn screening department has to figure out where this child is and how to get a hold of them. And then usually they don't want to be the one calling you, so they try and reach out to the doctor so that someone you're more familiar with calls you. And then you have to get in touch with the metabolic doctor and get up and have a visit. That's a lot of stuff to happen. And I mean, with us, he got treatment at 7 days old, which that's pretty quick, and I think says a lot about some of the really good things within our healthcare system. So now that things are easier, I really want to give back like the parents before me have done. I really want to be an advocate. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm trying to be involved in as much as I can be. This is the first conference that I've really been involved in, and it's been really fun to be a part of it and help plan it. I'm also a part of the Organic Acidemia Association, and then I'm a consumer task force member for Baby's First Test. If you don't know what Baby's First Test is, they do a lot of advocating for newborn screening. If you look them up online, it's a really, really, really great website that just has tons of information on newborn screening and the different diseases that are screened for and what you can do. And so part of being a consumer task force member is that you do a big project that's centered around newborn screening. And I've been really, really lucky to work with the director for newborn screening in Vermont, Cindy, and we're doing a project that's really it's a survey for parents whose children have had an out-of-range result from newborn screening, and it really breaks down that first call that they're getting regarding their out-of-range result. There's kind of a set formula about what needs to be said during the call, but not a ton of set things, and different people are told different things. So the point of the survey is to see what kind of information parents are getting during that call, if they feel like they're getting the information that they need, or if there's more information that they could want. I know that one of the things that we were told when the nurse called us was not to look anything up online, which was not going to happen. So I went right to that internet, Mike and I both did, and we Googled all night long. And if you Google GA1 online, you're not going to find good things. You just don't want to look it up. But there are some really good websites like Baby's First Test, so directing people to websites that have good, solid information, I think is a good way to move things forward. So that's our story. And I mean, Isaac is just doing really, really great, and it's definitely been an interesting, rough 3 years, but look at that smile. So, anyways, if anyone has any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Are you going to take the survey results and then put that in the form of a sort of a script that the newborn screening will send out to the, are you going to take the survey results and put it in the form of a script for the pediatrician's offices to use when they call out results?
It's going to be something of that nature, or it might just be, these are what parents would really, bullet points, please, because a lot of states have kind of a general guideline, but a lot of it is more centered on, if your kid is not eating, you need to bring him right to the doctor. If you're not, oh my gosh, you've just been giving life-changing news, here's where you need to go because you're going to want more information. So that's kind of the main point. We're going through the IRB process, which is apparently very hard. And so hopefully that will be figured out soon.
So is it a gene mutation?
Yes.
They evaluate
Yes.
everything else?
They did not evaluate us. So the newborn screening, they take a little heel stick of blood from all children that are born, unless you say, do not screen this. It's done for every single child, and it tests for, each state is different, but there's like 32 core diseases that most states test for, and most of them, I think all of them are genetic diseases, right? No?
Because there's hearing.
Oh, hearing and, yeah.
Congenital heart and thyroid.
Yes.
So those are the non-genetic.
So, yes, but there's a group of genetic disorders that are screened for, and GA1 is a genetic recessive disorder, so my husband and I are both carriers for it, and 1 in 4 of our children would have it, basically.
So there was previous history?
There's no previous history of anything. But GA1 has only been screened for in Vermont, early 2000s, I think. So it's not a disease that has been screened for that long. So sometimes you can look back and see if maybe someone had it and didn't get it. It kind of, sometimes it resembles cerebral palsy a little bit, so sometimes you would look for that. So they used to call it Amish cerebral palsy. So, because it's very, very common in the Amish population. Any other questions? Great, thank you.